everything else versus Bitcoin essentially gets spent and dies.
I want to be able to have reactive security, and I think OpVault is today the most straightforward, easiest to use way to do that.
I will not be insulted by a clockmaker.
Overall, these kind of ways to make the network easier to both build on and interact with, I think is a really big deal.
If Bitcoin existed when we started Twitter, we would not have to go down the ad model path. I mean, it's simple as that.
Integrating Lightning into a social network is the killer app.
Hello, and welcome to the Bitcoin.Review podcast, where we explore developments and projects with the people who actually make them happen. The show is supported by Pod 2.0, Sat Streaming, and CoinKite. If you're a new listener, I'm NVK. I run CoinKite, where we've been helping people secure their Bitcoins for over a decade. We make the cold card and fun products like the block clock. You can find more information about it on coinkite.com. Hello, and welcome back to Bitcoin.Review. Today we're doing a panel about censorship and, privacy, censorship, filters. The people are getting more heated about the discussion, which is normal. And also, I think we're starting to move to the second part of the revolution, right? And we all know that in whatever the 10th level of the revolution, the revolutionaries kill each other. So hold off your horses still, people who are all building different clients and different solutions out there, because don't worry, at the end, you're not going to be friends anymore, but you can still enjoy now. You can stare like a good quality decade of being still cordial to each other, frenemies. We all learned this from Bitcoin. Many people have rage quit through time. It's the natural path. And anyways, with that, I'd like to introduce our panel today. Hodlbod coming back. Hello, sir.
Hello. It's been mere hours since we last talked.
I know, right? But we were not wearing shirts on the last one.
Right. Yes. Save the nips.
Save the nips.
Oh, this is strange.
Vitor,
Hello,
you missed that one without shirt.
I'm glad I missed, I guess.
It's probably a feature. Fiatjaf, welcome back, sir.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. So, how's the weather in the land?
It's hot, as always.
Sounds good. So, guys, why don't we get right into it? So, maybe let's start approaching with where do you guys sit? Each one of you sit on in terms of I like privacy. Sorry, I like censorship. I don't like censorship. I think censorship is important, and it's going to happen anyways. Where in all this mess do you sit?
What is this discussion about censorship like? What has prompted this? I missed that.
Okay, so there you go. That's a good way to start.
Fiatjaf wasn't around the past 2 weeks.
I am around, but the clients don't feed me with the correct data. So I just see a bunch of people putting me in hell threads with a million dimensions, and that's all I see on my Nostr clients.
I'm not gonna get into who or what, just about topics. So I just think that we had an issue with one client that's opinionated about what's on the feed, and somebody tried to game the feed and got the boot. Which, if you don't talk about who and what, it doesn't sound that insane. But then maybe it was not as transparent, so some people got pissed at that. Vitor, you have had you have an opinionated client. You have some history on this topic. But I think it's been flaring up more, right? I think this last one really sort of was salt on the wound to some people, and to some other people were just this isn't expected. So maybe, Vitor, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with some of the...
Sure. So I think it's important to try to define what censorship is. Because during the discussions, it gets a little bit heated, and people expand the definition of censorship to whatever they want to see, right? So a few months ago, for instance, I had this discussion with one of our users that essentially, and I used this in one of our forums, so Sorry if you folks already seen it, but it essentially saying, you know what? Censorship is just the ability to prop up and prop down groups of users inside one app. So for groups of users that you don't like, the app will just prop them down a little bit, and the users that you do like, you prop them up. And if you take that definition for censorship as an example here for the discussion, everything becomes censorship. So for instance, in that particular discussion that I was talking to them, the fact that Amethyst chose a card layout that essentially says the images are a little bit smaller than what they could be on a full bleed layout is censoring users that use a full bleed style of post, right? So because they, people that are using Amethyst will not see, a big image, and they will like less, they will zap less, and so on. So if you take that position, then it becomes very hard to actually debate. My position is actually the opposite of that. My position for censorship is very simple. Censorship is what happens when you have monopoly of power over free speech of an area or a group of people, right? So usually, historically, this has been that, the state has that type of power, and the state kind of blocks you from speaking out. There could be cases where corporations have that type of power, and they block you from speaking out. But if you don't have a monopoly on speech, then there is no censorship, because you can always choose some other client, some other place, some other another place where that power doesn't exist, and then make your speech over there. So for me, it's very interesting to see all these discussions, because it always, the debate always happen in some point. There's a line between these two extremes of censorship is just a state-powered kind of tool, and the other side is everything is censorship. If you change the way you design an app, or if you decide to not implement a NIP, users of that NIP will not be seen by the users of the app, and thus you are censoring them on that content.
So to summarize it, would you say that your position is, if the protocol is open and people can sort of migrate to a different client, right, provided that their data is being pushed into the network, they are not being censored because they can just switch clients, right? And the other client may behave in a different way, so they're covered, right? I mean, they can still have speech, they're just maybe not visible in a different platform, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So they're always able to speak. They have the right to speak. They cannot force others to listen to them. That's the difference, right? Because some people will conflate those ideas. Say, because I have the right to speak, my speech has to be present in every point that you offer as a solution to other folks. And for me, those are two very different things.
So, Hodlbod, you have some opinions on how to frame it too.
I have too many opinions, and they're probably bad opinions. My opinions have been changing steadily as I work on this. I feel like Nostr is kind of growing up right now. We were talking about security before we started recording, and it's the same kind of deal there. We have to grapple with some really grown-up topics here, which is not what I was expecting when I first started developing. I think Vitor is totally right. There's two different kinds of censorship. When I first got into this, I was like, I'm pro-censorship. I just think that the end user should be the one doing all the censoring. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's quite that clear. I still adhere to that ideal. But so, on that side of things, it's basically giving end users the tools to be able to traverse their social graph in a way that gives them the information and the content that they're interested in seeing. That's a pretty straightforward deal. And if clients differ in the tools that they provide, that's completely their prerogative. They can be strict and lose users, or they can keep users who want strict moderation. Now, of course, you got to avoid clients centralizing and then pushing everyone else out. But as long as there's client choice, it's it's fine. People can do what they want. And then client choice is not the only thing that we have. We also have relay choice. So censorship is really, really, really impossible on Nostr, because you can just fracture the network. So if you want to speak just to your own relay that's hosted in your house, technically that is That's free speech. Maybe no one else is seeing what you're seeing, but you can have these increasingly smaller shards of the network that support different standards. Maybe based on country, or maybe based on the risk tolerance of the users, or just based on the tone of the community. And then you have like kind of real world constraints that are not ideologically motivated. So free speech absolutism, I think I can subscribe to that for some definition of that term. But like free speech has never included like blasphemy laws, right? Every culture has blasphemy laws where it's not socially acceptable to say certain things. And if you do, you'll either be shunned or you'll be actually prosecuted. And so the fact that those exist in any given society kind of has to be a premise for censorship. And I'm not saying like a state should be the one who's in charge of enforcing those things. But like the fact is that they exist, and in certain jurisdictions, if you say certain things, you will be prosecuted. So if we're looking to maintain the safety and the freedom of developers and users to use Nostr in a way that supports their goals, whether it's entertainment or dissident speech, we need to take those real physical threats into account. So, for example, I think most people don't care, or are mostly in this to create a safe space for kind of political dissidents and that kind of free speech. None of us are here to give a refuge to child pornographers, but the fact is they exist, and they can be used as an attack, whether it's legitimate, illegal content activity, or whether it's feds posting stuff to attack the protocol. I mean, I don't think we're there yet. I think mostly what we have is like trolls and just bad people.
Yeah, people just being dicks.
Yeah. So we have that problem, and that is not a problem that can be solved through end user selection of content. It requires a centralized solution, unfortunately. And maybe it doesn't in other countries, but in my country, it really does. Like I've been looking a little bit into how to deal with this, and I don't have my head wrapped around it yet, but it seems like, you can go to jail for receiving illegal content. You can go to jail for reporting illegal content. So like, what are you supposed to do? I mean, you have to basically preemptively filter this stuff out.
Why do you go to jail for reporting? I don't get it.
Yeah, so if you report to a specific hotline, then you're okay. But most people don't know that hotline exists, and so they're gonna tell the service provider. And in our case, that's relays. So what that means is you publish a content report, possibly signed by your own private key,
with illegal
and then
content.
You publish it, and that legally is going to be seen as advertising illegal content rather than like reporting it and trying to suppress it. It's super screwed up, but like I understand why things are the way they are.
So Fiatjaf, just for this round here, when you were designing Nostr, what was your view in terms of like how to sort of like handle filtering, censorship, and user choice?
Well, the way I see it's like, if you want to seek content from some person, your client should try to give you the content from that person. If you want to see some whatever crap, you should see that. And if your client's not doing that for you, like it's a bug on the client. The client can't find the data. It's a bug on the client. If the client decides for any reason to hide that data without you telling him to, it's a bug on the client. And that's how I saw it. And if you the most basic interface of Nostr is just you following people and you seeing what these people said. But then like the other kinds of stuff can get in. Like if you're browsing the replies to some note, you want to see replies from people that you don't know. So you might get some stuff that you don't want to see from that. And that is the part that I think the relays should be filtering. And there must be a way for you to smartly select relays that only have content that you will want to see, even if you don't follow the people specifically. So,
but then there is a bit of a contradiction there, right? Because you are now assuming that those relays will have some form of filtering themselves, or will be selecting who can send stuff to them and who can't. Is that correct?
Yeah. And that's the perfect, okay and valid that they filter
In
people.
most of these discussions, you got to this point where the user has to choose to make the decisions by themselves or delegate the decision to somebody else. In this example that Fiatjaf is talking about, you delegate the decision of what I like to see to the relay. But you could also delegate to a DVM that Pablo is working with these days, a data vending machine.
So, but hang on a second. Here's the issue with this. So I am all for personal responsibility, and I am a free speech absolutist. So I am as far on the spectrum as possible in this topic, right? But I also, would want every single kiddie porn asshole to be drowned somewhere. So let's just put that in perspective, right? Now, what Fiatjaf is describing to me, and Fiatjaf, please interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we are now creating a system in which you have smarter servers, smarter relays, and not just dumb relays, right? Because the relays are making decisions on content. So we are for servers that make some decisions on content. And here's why, in my view, this is okay. Relays are also users, right? There's still a human who owns that machine, who pays for that data, right? Who may choose not to have certain kinds of things in their servers. It's their freedom to ignore certain kinds of content. And if we're all being very realistic here, Nostr right now has, maybe 130,000 truly active users, right? That a client can handle that right now, right? Like that's not the end of the world for an iPhone with like enough juice, right? Now, if we have like 100, 200, 300 million people in Nostr, right? That's no longer possible to be digested by a client. Like it's impossible. So you're going to need to have relays that, one, don't see everything, and two, like they do smart filtering, they do filter based on user preferences and all that stuff. So we sort of like made this model now where we have smart servers and smart clients, right? Am I like off the mark here? Have we grown into this?
Well, I think the way we can have both. Like we can have dumb servers, but people shouldn't be asking these dumb servers for, give me everything you have. They should only be giving like, give me everything from this specific person that I handpicked. And then the dumb server can do its job and be useful.
So that's just for actual notes, right? Or say DM or private notes, right? But then there is all the other stuff, right? There is analytics on the total network. There is all the heuristics you get for getting topics and tags and lists and spam and everything else.
Yeah, for all that, I think you need some degree of smartness on the relays. You can't just the dumb relays still have this part for the most basic experience, which is following someone.
John, are you okay with this model where we have smarter servers?
Yeah, I think server smarts should be applied in layers, ideally, but that's probably not super germane to this topic. Sorry, I was just doing push-ups because I'm really cold up on the roof here. So I'm a little out of breath.
You didn't see because this is a podcast, but he went off screen.
Yes, he did.
And he did a few push-ups and then he just came back.
Yeah, so I'm a little breathless.
Don't you want to put like a jacket or something?
Oh, I didn't bring one. I wasn't planning for this. Like my whole morning is a total disaster, but that's fine. I'll just suffer. But yeah, so like someone, I think NVK mentioned that relays are users too, right? So they're run by an entity, and that means that person can do whatever they want. Users have choice. They can choose different relays. So if a relay wants to get really smart, I don't see a problem with that on its own. Especially, so the place where smart relays become a problem is when they start introducing new interfaces that everyone else has to support. So, like a search endpoint. An advanced search endpoint. If you don't support an advanced search endpoint and someone else does, they're going to take usage away from you. And if they have a business model, that also means revenue. So, and then of course, search is a centralizing thing. It requires some infrastructure in order to run, raises the bar for entry for being a full relay. So that's where like relay intelligence becomes a problem. Filtering content,
but let's just tweak this. Let's not be so theoretical, right? Like your solution, Coracle, right? You're probably running some relays too, right? So like. Nope. No, okay, no relays at all.
I run an archival relay for myself.
No, like that's a fair way of saying fuck it, right? Like,
yeah.
But then how do you do like, network analysis, right? So spam, bad evil content and, stats or tags and things like that?
Poorly.
Okay, fair enough.
My mission has been basically figure out how much you can do on the client, on a web client, which is a lot more limited than a mobile client. So I've got very limited resources. I've got a couple of things, like I run an image proxy server. I was relevant to the discussion, I was running a image hosting service built into Coracle. And I turned that off a couple weeks ago, exactly because of what we're talking about right now. I do not want to get into this stuff. I'll send my users to nostr.build or, nostrcheck.me or something. And it sounds like they've been, doing the moderation required for an image hosting service, which is just not something I want to do, not something I want to spend time on.
So, but the consequence of this is that you are creating centralization around your preference of relays. In some way, you as a client is dictating a lot of, like some filtering and some censorship preference, of which relays you make default on new users who create accounts, for example, right?
I encourage accounts to select their own relays. That's part of the onboarding process. But yeah, and as far as like images go, I'm a big fan of some way to do image hosting using the relay topology. Using a single centralized server is like, it's just not great. If someone wants to host their own images by running a relay, they should be able to do that. And then they should be the only person who can upload images to that relay. Like that's completely fine. So I want to see something like that happen. And what that gives you is basically an unlimited number of services that support a common interface. And then you can just allow your user to choose instead of the client choosing. Because right now I only support nostr.build.
Okay. Yeah, they are fully centralized, right? I feel like majority of the images go there now. And if we're being very honest, right? as much as we love that project, there is a higher chance that they go away than imguru then like goes away, right? Like, so like it's a complicated thing, right? And it's not like we're gonna just do DHTs with stupid IPFS or something like that, which you also go away, and somebody has to have the data, right? Like there is no reasonable good solution for binary data yet, realistically speaking.
Yeah, we do have alternatives. People are building them, but it's not there yet. And it's very IPFS-like, meaning that you store just the hash of the content, and then the client has to figure out where the content actually is. But for us, because we are in the social media space, we must have the content available right away from when the user clicks in it. So it's
we haven't had any sort of like breakthrough yet on that solution, right? Aside from movies and DHTs, which were marriage made in heaven, we still haven't figured that one out. But Vitor, like going back to your client and your client server model and that stuff, like what's your view? Same question and scope as I posed to Hodlbod.
Yeah, we don't run servers as well. We do have the view count server and the push notification server just because we have to. But if there was a service that was provided to the network, we would just use that service. I think both Hodlbod and I, we don't like the idea of clients using or running relay services because it's a centralizing mindset, meaning when you do both, you can easily connect it to outside of the Nostr protocol and kind of force the solution to just work within itself and not allow other relays to participate in the game. So from a mindset standpoint, I just don't like the idea of clients running relays and relays running clients. So the opposite is also true. I don't think relays should be running interfaces at all, for instance. And in this particular discussion with the trending algorithms, for instance, even though the relay has all the data that you would need to calculate everything you need to actually put out a trending feed, I think that should be provided as a service to the user, where the user would subscribe to different services, different, say, pub keys that are providing this data for free or as paid service. And by subscribing to that, then you get some freedom of choice on how do you want the algorithm to behave, as opposed to forcing kind of the relay, the storage part of the relay system and the service part of the relay system to be one, which is not ideal. I think it's just it's a centralizing force that we would regret later if we invest on them. Of course, people are free to do whatever they want, right? So if they want to do a relay like this, they can.
And they will.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was one of the first conversations I had with Fiatjaf. I was suggesting that, we're going to run into a place where we're going to have like a buffer relay or something like in between the client and the relays, because, you simply cannot do the computation on the client at some point very soon, right? Like it's impossible. So what you're going to end up seeing is like, now is a good time to bring Primo up probably, where, what they're doing is, they have their caching servers, which is kind of like a buffer relay. And then they have a relay. This is just like a high quality relay. And then they have the client, right? But, you can still subscribe to other relays, right? And I think that's the standard. You do subscribe to others right from creating an account there.
Only for publishing. I think it's only for publishing. To read data, you only read from their server.
But I'd have to ask Milian. I think they do pull from your list of relays into their caching server. So if you come in with a list of relays, they will essentially go pull from those relays into their caching server, right? Because otherwise, you would be like, it'd be fully centralized essentially. Like you'd be only looking at their relay.
I don't think they do that, and that's one of my criticisms of what they're doing. But
I'll bring Milian for the next panel.
But maybe here's the point to just close with our initial comments. Because Nostr is so open, we will have these solutions available to the public.
Absolutely.
And, the best free market guy in myself just thinks, what? People will choose the best, whatever happens. So it's the same with censorship. In part of me actually would be very happy to see a censorship embracing client. Simply says, I am government of the United States. I'm proposing a new client. We are only going to talk, about the U.S. and good things about the U.S. Or let's flip it to corporate. I am Coca-Cola. I'm going to do a client. I only accept positive messages related to Coca-Cola in my client and put it out. I would
They're going to use data vending machines to filter that out.
They could, right? Or could, I don't actually care how they do it. It could be private, it could be public, could be open source or not. But having them makes the counterpoint that the free market needs to choose the best solution, right? It's just the same, I am happy to have a lot of shitcoins out there because it makes Bitcoin look so much better. Because otherwise we would just be like, yeah, Bitcoin is good, but we don't really have anything else to demonstrate how bad this could be. And so just trust me, bro. So by having people out there doing some crazy stuff, doing stuff that we don't agree at all with the approach, is actually beneficial to the Nostr ecosystem. And the fact that it's open, that we can't block them from doing that, it works on our advantage. Or at least if you trust free market, it will work on your advantage.
So if we're being super honest, right? Most people don't want freedom. What they want is a better sell, right? And realistically speaking, most people want censorship, right? Most people don't want to see the kiddie stuff. Most people, want some language censorship. If you get all the Mastodon people, they only want to see rainbows and they don't want to see any libertarian conversation of any kind. It's only marks allowed, right? That is what people want. People want to be coddled. People want to be in a safe space and just very lightly challenged here and there so they can gang up and then go say how they are right on that one person. But they only want one person from the other group. So if Nostr truly is free and open source protocol, right, a truly open protocol network, we are going to see a balkanization, right? Like you're going to see like relays that don't talk to other relays, and not that they should talk to each other, because I know Fiatjaf doesn't like that. I still think that that's inevitable. But, like we're just going to see like all these groups of people by choice not talking to each other, right? I mean, Fiat, like how do you see these things scaling?
Me? You're asking me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
you created the shit. It's your problem now.
I don't think there's any problem at all. Like it's just like you open a website from someone and then you fetch notes from that person, and yeah, I think the only problem is like the things on the side, like the replies and stuff. But you don't have to have a complete view of the network. You can just view whatever your relays that you like are using, and like the clients could have some way of sharing this data, like, oh, you want to use these relays that your friends are using, so you will see the global feed of these relays and not from the other thousands of relays that will exist. But if you're a leftist and you want to see leftist stuff, you just subscribe to leftist relays, but you still want to see the Trump posts because you want to make fun of Trump or something. Yeah. So you still subscribe to the Trump relay and you connect to that, and you only fetch the Trump posts. You don't fetch the Trump fans replies. You only fetch the Trump posts, and then you see the replies from the leftist relay that are just people making fun of Trump, and then you're happy.
But how do you guys see, like realistically speaking, right? Like I have 100 million users producing, say 10 posts a day each, right? That's a lot of fucking content and a lot of data. And that's the low end, right? Because let's say 10% of those would be like 1,000x more active, right? But anyways, let's just go with that. Like, how are you guys who don't want to run servers? Okay. How do you plan on like, digesting, computing all this data, right? Like even for just display purposes, like it's just like getting this, downloading all this stuff and queuing it up.
What is there to be downloaded? Like, depends on your choices. If you want to download notes from people you follow or replies, that's very easy. That is very simple. But if people want to display like counts, that's completely unreasonable to expect that the clients will do that.
What about like I wouldn't say like a global feed per se, because that would be like nearly impossible to follow. But let's say a topic, right? Like Twitter really got this right for all their flaws. Like it is absolutely incredible, right? That you can go on that search tab that has the trending things, right? And you can truly discover a whole world out there of a thing, right? Or you can figure out the fuck fires are happening somewhere or some revolution somewhere else, right? Like, how do we handle this discoverability? Because that's where most of the censorship is going to happen. And that, like, just too much data.
I respectfully disagree. I wrote a browser extension to hide the trending posts on Twitter. I just got sick of seeing this. And you see, they're an engagement farming tool. When you load up Twitter on web, that bar shows before your main feed. So you've got a good like half second where you're browsing that trending stuff, and then you actually get what you asked for. So I just turned it off entirely for my Twitter experience.
Okay, but let's say like that's okay, like for you personally, right? But like a lot of people want to, like I'm with you, by the way. I wish my main feed was just the people I follow, which you can't, like you have to keep on switching back because it keeps on changing and switching you back to the one that's mixed. But like I want the one that's mixed too, like often. I do enjoy that. So like, how do you provide me as a user with that, like in like as a client only?
Centralization. Like you're just not going to get that from Coracle unless there is a DVM that does that process, and then Coracle can integrate that, and you can choose who to centralize your preferences and taste. I mean, that's mind control essentially. That's TikTok that you're describing. Is this algorithm surfaces content and it goes viral, and then it's gone in 10 minutes, and the next thing is going. Like I don't think that is a human way to operate. I'm not interested in doing that. I mean, I'll watch like YouTube shorts sometimes, and sometimes I'll enjoy it, but I just don't think there's really any value to that. No, that's a
hang
different
on.
question from
Let's
is this
just-
what people want? Like people do want it. You're right.
Yeah, no, but
So,
let's try to not go the extremes for 1 second, right? Which I do think it's important to go all the way to the edge because that's where we normally end up. But like let's try to just be a little bit more productive in the middle. Let's imagine that we can make something better. You know, the public square is the best example, right? Like where, you know, there is the crazy people shouting, you know, like just say you're in the middle of New York Times Square, right? There's the crazy people shouting, there's the people celebrating their bachelorette party, you know. But then if we go back, you know, a couple hundred years, there might be some more interesting people having conversations and playing chess, right? So having a temperature, maybe I'm an idiot and like we really are ruining ourselves with all this, but like having a way of like discovering, interacting, and creating like public squares and some public interest and cohesion sometimes is very useful. Like how do we do that?
I dispute your premise. Like if you think about the term public square, I don't know how old that term is, but you know, before 100 years ago, the biggest cities in the world were like 1 million people. So your public square were actually fragmented and had a high amount of like ideological, political, ethnic coherence. And so a public square was a place where people could actually have a rational discussion. There is no such thing now if you try to loop the entire world into it. So I don't think that's valuable. Now, like maybe to answer your question, I do think that relays, since they can be run by people or entities, they can act as publishing companies. And so if you want to hear this person's viewpoint, like rational, logical viewpoint, maybe they have like guests on their show to argue about things, then you can subscribe to their relay, and there you go. You get this you get an actual public square, which is actually like a really localized sort of conversation.
Well, I mean, like you really go back, like, you know, if you want to go back, you go back to Greece and like the beginning of democracy, and you know, you had to be a landowner in order to vote because that meant you had skin in the game. So you can't just fuck shit up and then leave because your land loses value, right? So like it was possible to have something that resembles democracy. And, you know, you had, you know, the Socratic type of seminar, right? Where everybody can lift their hand and challenge things. Of course, he got murdered at the end if you didn't agree the majority. Nothing was perfect ever. Actually, far from it. But like, you know, I feel like we have like we can't roll back, right? Like society sort of like went into this path, and I think we're just gonna exacerbate this path. So like it's more like how can we sort of like maybe balkanize, at least intellectually, so that we can have more productive things and hopefully reflect them in our meatbag world. But like okay, so like if we're dealing with like market demand, then let's like not sort of be super theoretical and super emotional about our own personal preferences. Like the market demand is going to be for something that probably resembles some of the things that we have nowadays, right? Which is like, say, Reddit. Reddit was super successful because, you know, you could have more interesting, longer discussions, right, with each other. And if it wasn't for the namespace scarcity, you could have forks of our Bitcoin, for example, that was called our Bitcoin, right? Like that's the censorship and moderation bullshit on Reddit is just because of the single namespace for each word. Now, on if we're moving on from this Twitter sort of like model for Nostr into like other things that still social, we stay there and then we'll go to non-social after. But like within social still that allows for a bigger discussion and are a little bit more fuzzy in terms of how things are aggregated. How do we survive this? Because that's probably even more content in without like having you know, even smarter clients or some buffers or some other things.
So there are technical answers to that. I mean, NIP65 is one of them, for instance, where if you know who you want to get posts from, which public keys, then the client will know where to go to get it. So that by itself will help filter the amount of data that you need to download. The second part is the use of the DVMs, the data vending machines that Pablo is pushing forward. If pub keys become services that can help organize content inside Nostr, then now you suddenly have a very interesting tool that is decentralizing in nature, because pubkeys can just do, can be dependent from relays and independent from clients. They're just other users. And you just go through them to pick the content that you might think works for you. And when you're picking content, there is a difference between you, or a mindset shift from the user side between I am in the mood for the same things I have been seeing all day long, or I am in the mood for something different. And that is like when you are designing an interface, you know the difference between the two, and you kind of place elements inside each one of them. So for clients to just get this right, they just need to know which ones, where is the user at in terms of mindset at the moment, and from there help the user pick what types of tools he would want to see that then will get the content the person wants to see. So it's not solved at the client for sure, but it will be solved in sort of like a web of trust type of way, where you have to trust somebody else out there to kind of put things together for you. Or you can have your own server, your own public keys, and you subscribe to yourself. And that server will then get the content you want in the way you want, in any way you see fit. And others can use that service as well. So the hope here is that because Nostr is so decentralizing, that becomes more normal than not, right? Like people actually building these things and shipping it out and see how they work. And hopefully, the best wins in this case. Because the opposite can also happen, which is just, Apple coming in and say, you know what? We're going to have 500,000 relays. It's all going to be through us. And unless you're connected with our ecosystem, no client will ever work because they will not find any information. That could also happen. And there is nothing we can do to block it from happening. So it's about the freedom of choice that each user out there has and how much weight they are putting into that decision.
One of my favorite filters is I want to see content from the followers of my followers, right? Because people I follow, I already have, it's essentially my whitelist, right? But I want to see the content of their followers without following them. Sorry, the contents of the people they follow without having to follow them, right? It sort of sits outside of the Nostr sort of model, right? Because my client doesn't know what to pull unless it looks at the pub keys of every single follower that I have and then go fetches the nodes of all those people, right? Like that's exponential. It's kind of hard to do on the client side. It's still possible, but it won't be very soon, right? Like as this grows a little bit more. You get very tricky. But that is a web of trust, essentially.
Now, wait a second. I actually don't think it's that hard. That first level of just follows, that should be, any modern phone should be able to handle that, no matter how big this is. It's work, right? So people have to, we don't do this yet, but it's work. You have to save those contact lists and so on. You have to actually make it efficient, but you should be able to handle it. When you do another layer, your follows, then things start getting very, very difficult to manage.
That would be a nice little quote unquote universe for you to watch, because that would be super interesting content.
Coracle actually does this. I have follows of follows. And, you would think that if you follow 1,000 people and all of your follows follow 1,000 people, you'd have 1 million pub keys. But that's not really true because people coalesce into social groups. So you have a lot of overlap between those different follows. It's not going to be truly exponential. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about forking subreddits. I think that's a really interesting idea, and that idea has sort of been emerging in Nostr over the past few months. I don't love the NIP72 communities because it doesn't really have all the tools that you need to make that sort of emerging forked community behavior happen. A lot of people were trying to build communities around topics because we have this precondition to think that topics are meaningful, but topics are not meaningful apart from value judgments, and that's people. And you have to trust certain people for their value judgments. So any community is going to be primarily social and secondarily topical. So this is what I was trying to do with that Explore tab in Coracle, which is not it's not very good yet, but the idea is the people you follow curate content, and that's very similar to just subscribing to topics for your follows. But like, you can't discount the social element. That has to be part of the equation. And just like another comment, like the Reddit, the fractured, that you said that a lot of the contention on the Reddit front comes from multiple communities being forcefully merged into a single community. And if you could just split those peacefully apart, you would have more diversity and less contention. And it's almost like the opposite problem that Mastodon had, where you were forced to select a community and like brand yourself as that, and you couldn't move from one to another. They're really similar problems.
Oh, and the issue with the activity pub goes deeper, right? I still remember the Bitcoin, was it bitcoinhackers.org? It was like a fairly large.
You don't even remember the name of your own site.
Yeah, I mean, like it's still, I left a message there. It's bitcoinhackers.org. Like, seriously, like, Mastodon is a fucking shithole. I mean, like, they like, oh, your relay does not, like, censor for unicorns, so therefore every relay in the network starts a relay, whatever the fuck they call it, like, goes and blocks yours, right? So, like, it is essentially fully centralized, and you don't have data portability, and you don't have, most importantly, ID portability. And I think that, like, I guess, like, my realization just had now is, like, I think the thing that I would defend on Nostr is the same aspect that it has to Bitcoin, which is, in Bitcoin, if you get your seed and you reload that into a different client wallet, right, with the right derivation path, all the shit appears again, your money appears again, right? Like, on Nostr, like, the behavior should be the same. As long as if I take my NSEC and I go to a different client, all the stuff appears. Sure, I may lose labels or some other crap that's totally meta, right? That ideally there is a spec for people to export separately from the network, or maybe it's even pushing to the network. Like, as long as we respect this model really religiously, I think we win, right? Like, we don't have censorship, like, in the truest sense.
Do you think normal people will switch clients? Like, normal people don't even know what a client is.
I think we will, because censorship will force them to try something else, right? Like, it's like Twitter, right? Like, it was open
switch.
enough.
People don't switch.
Because there's no alternative. I can't bring my whole, like, I can't keep on following the people who I follow on Twitter, who are completely unrelated to Bitcoin, completely unrelated to Nostr. So they're not in this world that we're in. They're like different topics, unrelated. I can't come to Nostr and bring their content with me. Like, I can't keep on following them from Nostr. By the way, somebody should create a bridge bot, client side only, doesn't go through relays, that, like, brings in all the content from followers that I have on Twitter, displays them on my feed, identifies if they're Nostr users, and when I respond to their content agnostically of which system they're in, they prefer Nostr, so it goes back to them as Nostr. That would be an amazing way of hacking Twitter into Nostr. But
that is the right way to do a Twitter bridge. Usually people approach it the other way. But yeah, making people read their notifications on the right platform is that's the right way.
Right? And then you create the preference on the reply, because that's the content production. That's the true value of social media, is the content.
Now let's make sure people get it, because this, I agree with Fiatjaf, people won't switch as much as we would like them to, unless there is a new feature that they would like to use. So the secret for decentralization in Nostr is actually having multiple different things that reuse the same key, right? So you're going to have, I don't know, a Reddit style client doing something, a Twitter style client doing something else, an email client, or, OnlyFans type of client. As long as you have these different activities and people have their keys in each client, or have maybe one client that is just signing for everything, it should be fine, because people will see alternatives and they will investigate. If censorship, for instance, comes in, they will know that they have another option, and they could migrate their friends over there.
A big problem that we have, not a problem, but like a big reason right now why we have everybody trying to make a Twitter-like Nostr experience, is because, there is a handful of users only available for Nostr. And, like the main sort of driver of this adoption happened because people were trying to create this Twitter alternative, really. But like, that's not going to be true, in a year or two from now, right? Like, you're going to have other things that people are doing that are more interested. Then I guess this gets to the second part, like that I wanted to discuss is like, okay, social, cool, yay. Now, what about the other 99% of shit we can do in Nostr, right? Like,
I don't think we can do. I think everything you can do in Nostr is social. If you want to do something that is not social, it won't fit. But yeah, there are many kinds of social activities besides the.
But what about calendar, right?
Calendar is social. If you want a personal
sure.
calendar, yeah.
But I guess like when I mean social, I mean more like a Facebook, Reddit, Twitter like experience, right? Like the three major things that people do with social, although there's video, TikTok, and Instagram crap. But yeah, so like, you have the calendar stuff. I'm super excited about that because fuck call dev.
You've also got like product reviews.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like everything, that Nostr's value proposition is bringing your social graph with you wherever you go, whether it's maps or like product reviews. I'm excited about that. But then like the other side of things is the privacy aspect. If every website or like 50% of websites end up with Nostr integrated and they ask you to sign events based on their use case, now you're leaking your activity across all these different locations. So you're basically opting into digital surveillance, which is another one of the impetuses that kind of brought everyone over to Nostr in the first case.
I think that's where having key delegation or deterministically derived subkeys really sort of solves the problem. For every new website that requires me a Nostr login, I can just create a new key per site, right? Like now I'm not leaking emails, I'm not leaking phone numbers. It's fucking great.
But that doesn't solve the case of like, I want to know like what kind of shampoo all of my friends think is good, right? And so you look for 5-star reviews of shampoo from all my friends.
But see,
and
why don't
if that's done using key delegation, you don't have access to that. So you need like zero knowledge proofs or something.
But here's the cool thing. No, you don't have to go that crazy, right? Like you can do that on the client side. So you go fetch, like to a client, go fetch a review client. Go fetch, like if any of my follower, like the people I follow or the people that they follow have ever reviewed, a shampoo, and maybe the people can share their derived keys that they use to review shampoos with this client, but the servers don't know, right? Maybe your friends give you a list of things for you to have, like a bunch of public keys that are related to them for that purpose. I still think like we could use more interesting cryptography on some of this stuff. Go ahead, Fiatjaf.
You can do like you can rely on servers being smart, like and not revealing your shampoo reviews to anyone except your friends or something like that.
But they're gonna mine the shit for ads, right? They're gonna totally mine the shit for ads, which is okay.
Not if it's an open thing, like if you have multiple of these and then you trust one more than the other.
Right.
So, yeah. Eventually.
Or you can run your own.
You can run your own, but then people won't find it. Yeah, they can find it using NIP65 or something. Yeah, but on the topic of content discovery, I was thinking that you said, Twitter does a good job letting me know what's happening that I wouldn't know otherwise. But I don't think that's true, because the things that Twitter shows me, I don't care about them most of the times, and there are a bunch of other things happening that Twitter does not show me. So I don't think even with the complete centralization, they are able to do a good job.
I think that's very also location based, the quality of the discovery. Like where I live, where I am, due to the nature of size of country and the language, which is English, and a lot of the stuff, the content discovery is substantially better than, like Portuguese in Brazil, like which Twitter is horrible.
And then whenever I click on the trending tags or something, I just see a bunch of people repeating the tag, and I have no idea of the context. So
that's right.
And that has been like that for years and years, and I don't understand. But the Coracle thing for exploring people curating, I think in my initial idea, people would ask about discovery. How do I find people to follow? That was the first question everybody asked, and I thought like
it's still hard.
it's still hard, but I think it's manageable. Like if you follow someone, you must know someone, at least one person. And if that person is interacting with someone else, you follow that other person.
You know, like clients could get a lot smarter, right? So, for example, let's say you're using like a not Fold. What's the name of that podcasting 2.0 thing? Fountain. Let's say that we declare on each episode the pub keys of the guests, and now Fountain could create a list of people who are interesting related to the pod, and then I could have a client like Coracle or Amethyst who goes and auto follows for me anybody who's on that, and then asks me to sign, of course, right? But like auto follows or even just soft follow. So like you start showing the stuff for me before I even like publish a list, and you offer me the follow for that person, which is displaying on my feed even though I didn't follow.
Yeah, that's a very good. Yeah, that's what kind of what I was going to say. Like the manually curated stuff, like the basic thing is just replying or liking content.
That's what Instagram does. It shows you booty in between your friends of posts with a button saying follow, right? And then people go and say, oh, booty, and press follow, right? But like, you see, like, it's just we're doing a more honest version of the booty follow, right? But like this is where I think clients could really sort of go the next level.
But I wanted to say another thing like that is clients could do a better job differentiating between relays. I think Amethyst does a good job, and Coracle too, but it could be better. Like you could instead, besides follow, gathering people to suggest you to follow, they could also suggest relays. And like, if this person is publishing on a relay, like you could somehow imagine that relay has something that your current list of relays do not have, and maybe there's interesting content there. Like, for example, I remember a time I wanted to know what was happening in the Ethereum land, for example, because I only see Bitcoin stuff on Twitter. And I have no idea where to start. Like I searched Vitalik. And then they made the servers Hive.1, and they rank people, but still not very good. And it's a centralized service that is external to Twitter, and even then it's not perfect. Like you could follow a bunch of those people and visit their profile. But if I found Vitalik and I knew Vitalik was subscribed to a relay called Ethereum.relay or whatever, then I say, oh, maybe this has a bunch of stuff that will be interesting on the Ethereum topic. I could just browse that relay and look around.
You know, one thing I haven't seen is, let's call it a guilty pleasure list, where you have lists that are not, like, you follow those lists, maybe publicly, maybe privately, whatever, but like you can turn them on and off as lists. I don't see that in clients in a way that's like very sort of usable, because, you know, maybe there is a fight going on between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Maybe now you can have your guilty pleasure seeing what the Ethereum side is saying on your list, but you kind of want to turn that off after 10 minutes. As a set, right? Like, okay, you guys are probably like super, super overwhelmed with even the basic features for a client because it's so early, right? But like, is this kind of stuff things that like you guys like think a lot and try to implement as a side little project like often?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the that's what people want in a client. Because what, I don't know about others, but what I realize is that, yeah, you have your friends, you want to see their content and so on, but like half of the day, you want to see something cool, different, interesting, and it's, when you're in that mode, like it's not about the other people. It's not about the profiles of that people. It's about the specific content they posted at some point in time that it was actually interesting to you, as, I don't know, as a review in a movie, for instance, right? So we need to do a lot better in that. Maybe this is a good hook for the NIP32 labeling activity that is out there for people to implement. It basically allows you to label content. When you see somebody else creating a post or a thread with something, it allows you to go there and just make a stamp that has a mark. We could use that for everything from...
But that's a public list, right?
No, so it doesn't need to include in a list that you control. You just say reply or like a content. Like imagine the like.
No, but the network can see my labels.
They can see it, right?
That's the problem. When I go like stupid, I'm going to have a label called stupid or asshole.
We can make those private as well, not a problem.
No, but seriously, like, like people don't want to share with the world a lot of their internal dark thoughts, right? Like they want to have those as private. Kind of like, remember the Reddit extension, Super Reddit, or whatever it's called, I can't remember now, that allows you to label people and label posts and things. Like these things are private, right? They're super intimate. So maybe you want to have a...
Well, especially when you label people as well. Because you were saying like you were saying soft follows, which is a great set of words for me because it's the ability to describe not only a binary situation between are you following or not following, but what is your level of trust related to this other pub key, right? Do you like it or do you not like it? Do you think it's a traitor that you had some relationships in the past with, or is just a cool person that is posting interesting things but that don't necessarily trust that individual? So we are creating now this more nuanced view of the network, what we call in general like the web of trust stuff. And then you have a version for pub keys and a version for events. Both of them can be either private or public, but ideally, we want people labeling everything that they see out there as something interesting or not. And if it is private, we can't do much with it. But if it is public, then, algorithms out there can actually sort things out for us.
But, for example, but even just like having certain kinds of filters and thresholds for your for your followees, for the people you follow, we need a name for that. How do you call the people you follow?
Follows. That's the issue. Like that's the same word we use as well. It's not helpful.
Anyway, so right. Like your follows would be nice to be able to attribute a quality to that person that is not public, right?
Correct.
So because, for example, there is people out there who produce some of the best content that there is, and also some of the worst, least interesting things I could possibly ever want to see in my life. So like, I want to set a threshold where I only want to see posts from them, and I want them at the top of my queue if they reach a minimum of, 10 replies, or 10 likes or something like that, right? That would be like super useful because then I don't have to see, like some of the retarded posts that I make. I'm sure like a lot of people don't want to see those, like just filtering per key too.
It's funny when you mention because it relates back to why did Twitter even work? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like people are just putting their own shit out there, and like I don't want to see all your shit. I just want to see your Bitcoin stuff.
I think it's because you were not on the Twitter on the beginning of Twitter,
right?
See, it was a much smaller group. Same with when
us.
the Nostr was a little bit cozier, right? Like it's kind of cool. It's like there's a bunch of people you kind of like share this Nostr interest with, like, ooh, look at that. They like pictures of feet, like whatever. It's like whatever weird shit it is. It's just fun that these people you just bonded with, like share the shit's completely unrelated or you may not like.
Yeah, the way I see Nostr right now is like a Reddit Bitcoin, our Bitcoin community. We are just one. The entire thing is just one. And we have to break that wall to create another one. Like once we do it, then we're going to have multiple communities in Nostr.
There are the Japanese.
Yeah.
The Japanese are the second one. They're completely separate. They ignore us. They don't care. They don't even care about following the best practice of adding tags to events. They don't care about that.
I mentioned this on the last episode. It's funny about Japan is that like in the early days of the Twitter API, there were a lot of Japanese clients for Twitter. And they were all like sort of like different and trying different things too. So maybe we'll learn something in Australia.
But imagine like if with content labeling, one of the goals I have in mind for Amethyst is to figure out a way to make parental controls for kids. Because I want, at some point, give a phone to my kid, maybe when he's old enough, but there will be some filters on. How do you do that? How do you make that transition to onboard a person that is still under your guardianship and you want to protect that person without creating too much damage on the censorship-resistant part of Nostr?
DVMs, like I want to be able to, I don't want to label things in all honesty. I mean, it's kind of nice to label things here and there, but like generally speaking, what I want is there is an AI that goes out there and classifies posts into like, Bitcoin stuff, economic stuff, wildfires, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and then like, it serves me that like raw, right? And now I can pick which topics I'm interested in based on labels or whatever.
You just said you wanted to make a threshold of some people you're gonna see their posts only after they get so many replies, and now you don't like that's a full-time job to set up these triggers, but you don't want to.
No, absolutely.
Like I want
that is why Hodlbod and I are going crazy on this.
we can use like DVMs to do a lot of this heavy lifting, right? But to me, it's super important to have a little button where you turn off some of that like filtering for you to just see what's really coming in, because it's not like the AIs are that smart yet, or maybe they have biases, right, that you don't want to impact your view of the world.
I think maybe a good solution to this is influencers, because like if you for right, yeah,
wait,
influencers are good for
did
something.
you really say that? Wait.
Oh my God! Can we get like a?
Yeah, exactly.
So like DVMs have no personality, right? So you lose the social graph when you're relying on DVMs. Like now you're just back to like smart labeling based on the lowest common denominator, which is pretty much invariably not interesting. Influencers are influencers and have a lot of followers because they're interesting for some definition of that word, right? And so you at least, even if it's a weaker version of social, you at least have a personality behind those recommendations. And so with lightning splits, potentially, if an influencer, instead of touting themselves, they just went around and labeled stuff, and they got a portion of the zaps that are sent to that content, like say I get to a piece of content through a label, my client should also zap the person who made that label as a way of like thanking them for routing me in that direction. Obviously, this is like probably really complicated to actually put together in practice. But then you also have a social graph, like a secondary social graph. Like people aren't going to just follow DVMs for the most part, but people do follow influencers. So if someone I follow follows an influencer, you can kind of combine that second order follow with the engagement that the influencer gets in order to recommend content to me, and then also compensate the influencer. Like we need good incentives in order to make this recommendation stuff work and to get labels out at all.
What you're saying is that the influencers are artificial intelligence, right? Yeah.
It's hard to tell the difference. Yeah, they're pretty close.
No, but I agree. I agree with you.
Like they are kind of like AI-ish kind of things, right? Like it's a very narrow and shallow sort of like filtering of the topic.
You are an influencer, right? NVK, you are an influencer. So you shouldn't.
I am not an influencer.
Your class of people. So
fuck it. No, not an influencer. No, I try very hard to be unelectable. That's how I like to decide to like you say so much shit publicly that you have so many haters that you can't possibly be a proper influencer.
But I agree with that. I think you just need a small group of people labeling stuff. You don't need all the users to use labels. You just need them to follow labels from someone else.
In a way that does go back to a kind of like almost like an allegory to a smart server, right? Like that's where the censorship is going to come from somewhere. It really will. Like, I mean, filtering is to a certain degree censorship. I think like maybe clients often offering a way for you to turn that off and just have like a like sewer kind of unfiltered view of like what's happening just as a sanity check, that they're not overdoing things, might help with that trust. Because you have your influencer. If he breaks your trust, you don't want to hear him anymore, right? Say BitBoy sold you some sludge of a shitcoin that went to zero, right? You lost your trust on that influencer. Your DVMs, you want to make sure that like there's some level of transparency that you can from now and then check that. In radio, we call that squelch. You can change the noise filtering level, right? Essentially based on the signal intensity. And oftentimes when you are trying to make contact with somebody that has a low signal, what you do is you lower the squelch and you hear the noise, right? That's called monitor. You do that to make sure that somebody is not below the noise filtering threshold. And if clients have an equivalent to something like that, where it's like essentially you press a button and you see the noise with everything else, so you can, as a human, with preferences, with feelings and all that stuff, can sort of like get a sanity check of what's going on, and you're not missing something. Semisol is trying to break a client. You see Semisol, and then you turn off so you don't see Semisol anymore, right? Like kind of thing. You clear a lot of this sort of like this buildup of emotions and like people assigning evil where sometimes it's just incompetence, or people are just trying to do their best and they have better shit to do in their lives than dealing with somebody who's trying to attack their systems, for example.
Well, keep in mind,
right?
None of the client developers are censorship experts. So we don't know this thing. Like,
nobody
no one
is.
knows. Like, so we're trying to do a few features that we think users will like. And what you're saying, I think, makes sense to keep the trust on a specific client on a good level. And it happens to us as well in the past. I don't know if it's possible to predict all the options that should have been there beforehand, before they happen. So in a way, like what happens when people complain is just they are asking you to develop that feature that is just 1 out of 1,000 that you have in your list, and it gets prioritized because they complain. But and that's probably
call that bitching.
Yeah, it's the only way to go, right? Like
I'm just kidding.
The option to
People got that
if you
wrong.
want to be nice to us, don't bitch. Just make a bounty on the thing, or send a PR. Like that's how you're going to be nice.
Absolutely.
If you want to be like a terrible human being, you complain about it to everybody.
And the first person complaining, great. Maybe 5 people complain about the same thing. It's actually a good signal, right? Because it shows now that there's another 5 people who care. Now, when you have like 50 people who don't write code bitching about something that they could just go and pick a different client, it becomes annoying, right? Like, you guys are fucking giving your lives to build software for this shit. I mean, I gave up with BRB for now, but like, it's like, but I build products, right? Like, and you can't please everybody. You're always going to have people who hate you for some reason, but like, just remind yourself that like, nobody's here to be evil yet. Like everybody's trying to do their best under their preferences and within reason and their budgets and stuff. So like, just chill. If you really, really care about something so deeply, send a fucking email. I always say this. Take the time.
And be mindful. I would say be mindful the amount of noise that we get on our side. Like everybody is asking for something every day. So sometimes it's very difficult to understand what we should prioritize from what people say, because it's just too much.
I always joke that like, a well-written, well-described email with like every point that you want to make about the thing, even if you don't get a response, like the people read it. Yeah. And it's very different tone too, because you're not trying to get attention from other people on a social media, right? Like you're purposefully being private, so you're going to be taken more seriously. And now you have a lot more room to sort of describe what you want. You might get a response with some back and forth, like go that route first. Nobody's killing kitties here. Yeah. How do you like, so what is the best? So for Vitor is a pull request or,
make a pull request. That's the highest level. Like if you really want something done, find a developer, find a designer, download the code, either pay for them or get them as a friend and just ship it. Because I usually never reject a PR. Like I have rejected 4 PRs in the history of Amethyst.
Semisol is hearing this.
Yeah,
I hope that we will reject.
Yeah. To be honest, for example, on CodeCard, because it's like a security product, right? We pretty much don't take PRs. We love the PRs. We just rewrite them. And we often, like seriously, like people who go and put the time, like their features are often very well described and everything. We might not merge them just because it takes too much effort to merge their code. It's just, we're just going to rebuild it. But like, it's like amazing, right? Proof of work. It means you're going to probably make it in terms of your ask. Sorry, John, you were...
Oh, yeah. I was just going to second that. PRs are the gold standard. And I was going to say the same thing. Like, I rarely accept a PR without rewriting it. Like, sometimes I'll blindly merge a PR, then I'll just push it to production, and then it'll break everything, and then I'll go fix their bugs. Or like,
That's the
I'm
way.
a little OCD about my code style, and so like I'll just like reorder some imports or something, or whatever. But like, I appreciate PRs more than anything else because they're specific, and when you're reporting bugs or asking for features, specificity is everything. Saying like, I wish that the feed worked better is completely worthless. But if you actually like put a PR in that like changes how things are sorted, I will almost certainly change the code, even if I disagree with you, just because I appreciate that like level of granular feedback. So
the PR is a proposal, right? Is you're putting
Yes.
yourself out there to propose something as opposed to just reviewing
with work.
With work, right? So you're proposing something is a specific solution to the problem you faced, as opposed to just criticizing it or just placing a review out there, which is just you don't actually propose anything. You just say this is wrong. I don't know the solution, but it's wrong, and it's very easy to do it. But it doesn't really it doesn't solve the problem that you are complaining about.
Fiatjaf, talking about proposals, the nips. Let's go save the nips. So, like, how are you guys feeling in terms of like the amount of nips coming in, replication, the quality of them, the usefulness of them? How do you, as a group, decide what fucking makes it, what doesn't, right? Like, what stage are we in? Like, Bitcoin has gone through some of this, and to the hate of many who want to add new shit.
Whoa. No, just kidding.
Exactly. Don't worry, we're gonna have a drive chain podcast. I'm just joking. Never.
Now, like half of Nostr won't see us because they
That's
already
right.
put drive chain in the mute list.
That's right. No, but seriously, like, see, like in Bitcoin, the practice now, right? Like the standard is nothing gets added, nothing gets done, which is great, unless enough people really, really, truly fucking care about to the point of suicide, right? Then like maybe makes it, right? Which is fantastic. We're dealing with fucking money here. It should be that horrible. Now, Nostr is different, is way earlier too, right? Bitcoin was much easier in the very beginning to change shit. I'm not saying that Nostr and Bitcoin are the same. They'll probably have their own paths. But like, where are we on the nips now? Like, is it too noisy? Is it just right? It could be better? Like, how do you guys each feel about this?
this is the real semantic web.
I don't get it.
You would need to explain that to our viewers.
My point
Look
is,
at me. I am the semantic web now.
the protocol is mostly additive, right? So you're just like, it's a bunch of concretions on top of a core idea. There are some nips that like change how things work in more essential ways that more people should pay attention to. I don't know, maybe at some point we should split out into a core and an extensions protocol or something like that. But
That
like,
was NVK's proposal.
Oh, don't take too long. That was Gavin's idea. We were going to separate the wallet from the consensus code. That's why it's called Bitcoin Core. It used to be called just Bitcoin. But no, people want to fucking have a wallet. Anyways, I'm not even going to get fucking started on this. Jesus fucking Christ. This
But
making
like,
my blood fucking boil.
Fountain's adding podcast support, right? So like just having all these extra kinds, like Stemster's 1808 kind for like mixable tracks and stuff like that. That is awesome, and we should have more of that. But there are going to be thousands of those nips.
Infinite.
Yeah,
No,
essentially.
we're gonna limit to 100.
So
100 core nips, right? Yeah.
I love it.
Fiatjaf is dreaming.
But there, I actually believe, and I think you mentioned that with the core part. Like I really believe that at some point soon, a central core part of like mechanics of Nostr will sort of like display itself. It'll become very visible, and all this extra stuff will become a little bit more like, okay, these are all the plugins in a way, right? Like it's like you have this very defined and non-replicating and Fiatjaf's image set of functions, and then things start to become self-evident. That's one cool thing of time.
Well, it also helps us that we don't have a time chain. There is no order of events required, so it doesn't really need to fit in with anything. It's just like as long as relays are accepting your payload, it is a valid payload, and everybody else will deal with it. So it's very different than the Bitcoin development because You can do that in Bitcoin to some extent, but like most of the protocol, if you do weird things, we'll fork the chain, we'll do other things, right?
Well, every transaction has to be valid in order for all Bitcoin to work.
Right.
A single Bitcoin transaction could break the whole system.
And you have to be on the main chain, right?
Yes.
So like in that sense, I actually think we do have here something better in terms of like decentralization than in Bitcoin there.
How do you guys feel about ephemerality of content versus permanence of content? Sorry, go ahead, Fiat.
No, I want to rant about the NIPs. I think the only problem is like functionality that becomes mandatory. We should be very careful about that, and it's not a good answer to say people will do it. Like I think people shouldn't do it, and we should not advise them to do it. Like if every client starts relying on relays supporting search or something like that, I can't think of a good example. Then search becomes mandatory, and now normal people can't run a relay. So
can we have then like a non-wishy-washy definition of what is mandatory and what's not mandatory, for example?
What's mandatory is what everybody's doing is mandatory. So
well, see, that's wishy-washy, right? Because see, in Bitcoin, that's enforced by the economic nodes relaying the transaction.
I only have one client that codes everything, and everybody uses that client, which is Bitcoin Core, right?
No, but it really is. No, but see, like it's kind of funny when you say that. That like if you go look at the distribution of like which version of Bitcoin Core the network is using, it's a non-trivial amount of people using very old Bitcoin clients, right? So one of the best features of Bitcoin is backwards compatibility, right? If it's not backwards compatible, it's a hard fork. Now in Nostr that doesn't really matter because it's soft, but like maybe there is a social enforcement of like, listen, there is like this is a mandatory NIP, this is a non-mandatory NIP, and if you want to participate with everybody else in a more amicable way, for example, so that we don't block your fucking client, your relay or whatever, maybe you integrate this. I don't know, maybe that's idiotic. But have you guys thought about that?
I just want to let everybody know that I just blocked brb.io because it was breaking Amethyst. So this was a point towards me.
What you're saying is you cannot handle error 500.
Kind of, yeah.
BRB's errors are really weird. Yeah. No, but I agree with Fiatjaf. Like, it depends. What is required depends on what your use case is. Like, there are probably some clients for which NIP1 is not strictly necessary. And like, and it does depend on what other people are doing. If more people supported key delegation, that would be required. But as it is, it's optional. And like Minds.com is the only one who does that. So it just depends on like what you're building and what you want your user experience to look like for end users.
But like, it's kind of interesting you brought that. One single example is a fully centralized example trying to just really bridge into Nostr in a sort of a self-intended way of surviving as a project. It's very sort of like selfish intent, right? Like they're not really trying to fully participate. They're just trying to save themselves from oblivion. So they have this sort of weird integration with Nostr.
But they integrated with Mastodon now. They gave up on Nostr apparently.
Nice. We don't need to do that anymore then.
Right.
Let's kill NIP 26.
They'll be back. Alex Gleason will fix that.
But like to the point of the NIP repo, I actually think is working really well. I have been working on other specifications with are way more corporate than this thing, and this one just moves a lot faster and is a lot more productive. I think the writing style of the NIP is evolving significantly to the point that it's a lot easier now to read and to actually parse and get what you need to do as a new client, say, or as a relay. And I think we should keep changing that. I don't think, for instance, there is any specification working group model out there that we should be following instead of this one with NIPs right now that we have.
That's a very fair sort of like Nostr, like Bitcoin it's a new thing, right? Like it's like a new invention. It's a new paradigm. It never existed before, and there is nothing like it, right? So like it makes sense that its processes are very native, right? And like extremely sort of like, unique.
I wish we were not on GitHub, but that will happen sometime in the future.
Well, there is what's the name? I forget who, but somebody's trying to build a GitHub alternative. GitHub is a lot of things, but it would be really cool if you can do code patches with Nostr kinds.
Or just text patches. It's like we're just writing text.
I know.
It's not that difficult. We just need the time to
I want to be able
one.
to filter it out, create its own kind, kind Git. Problem solved.
But that exists, right? William did that a million years ago, and there's another client that does the same. And I think Kieran was working on a web interface for that, but he gave up for a while. And I think it's just a very simple text patch. Like it solves 99%.
Yeah, but there is no client. There is no, I don't have a client on my ZSH, like GitHub does or Git does or SSH does, right? Like there is no agent that goes and I can say or even better, if we can get this merged into actual Git, so now we can go as a remote is actually maybe a relay. Right? Fuck, that'd be awesome, right? You just go git push and this remote is a relay and the relay knows how to interpret just a git block. There's nothing else to it. And maybe people pull those, I don't know, you're going to have to identify what the fuck you're doing.
I think on the opposite way. I just want a website that has ability to edit text, comment on somebody else's text, and send a PR through whatever system they choose underneath it. So if that is good enough for the NIP team that is just writing text to move over time, the background will be enhanced to something more broader than just text.
Yeah, I don't know. I exist in VI, right? So I want VI all the things. So as long as I can do it from the command line and I don't have to implement my own fucking client to talk to some network, then I'm happy as a productive person.
I think Vitor is talking about just text and not code. So just some kind of text collaboration. It's simpler than code, but also more complex in some sense. Yeah, but the Git stuff is a separate thing, and I think it can be done very simply too, for code patches.
Git is social in a way, right? It became social, right? If you guys ever are old enough to ever have experienced SVN or other things, people simply say, fuck it, I'm not even going to do, source code versioning. It's just not worth it. I'll just, compare by hand. It was that bad. It really was. And then Git showed up and then it's holy fuck, this is completely awesome.
We would buy amazing tools that were creating solely to compare two folders in your hard drive because that's where we managed our versions. So you got to figure out what's different. And, we had a tool for that. It was quite expensive.
I bet, especially if you're in Java and you have 50,000 dirs inside of each other just ugly. Because it was designed. It's all for corporate, right? So they divide things in folders. So it's the fucking weird. Anyways, I'm not gonna make this into a shit on languages episode, which I could do for hours. So guys, we've been at this for about an hour and 40 now. Fiat, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you should go to the Thank God for Nostr podcast because there's where you can talk about languages, programming languages all day.
Yeah, that's what we're all about on Thank God for Nostr.
Yeah, it's you guys should hear the bit I did. Well, no, actually, it was not recorded with Pablo and Jeff, and we were slightly inebriated, shitting on all languages. It was quite fantastic. So, I feel from people who are building some of the biggest clients in the space, right? And I've heard from a few others on DMs before I put together this panel that there is this sort of very loud amount of people who are often not coders who feel there's an existential crisis to Nostr in terms of censorship and oh my God, we're gonna die. And then I see you guys all sort of calm, collected, sort of moisturized, flourishing in your lane, kind of building clients and being satisfied and like very open to ideas from users and everything. So it's not pushing them away. That's not the point. But like, do you guys think there's an existential client crisis already to Nostr because, mistakes happen?
I think Nostr is just one big existential crisis.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine because we're going to work on it. And if Nostr doesn't work, then that means hopefully something better replaces it. Like Scuttlebutt was really cool and I was interested, but it had some problems. So we moved on. Like I'm not married to Nostr. I never was. And I think that's how it should be. Like we're trying to solve a particular problem. We don't have to be married to a particular tool.
I think you only have this chance.
Wow.
So I'm more. I am with Fiat here. I feel like the time is right. Timing is everything, right? Like good quality of technology is never the determinator of the winning technology. Like period, ever, in all times, right? I mean, fuck, JavaScript exists for fuck's sake,
and it's the most used language. So
Sorry, John, but
that's totally fair. It is the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was the timing was right? The lobbying was right, and it became the default for browsers, right? And funny enough, it has nothing to do with Java. So my point is like, Bitcoin happened also in the perfect timing, right? Like it could not have been better. It could not have been worse. It just is, right? We don't pick the time. We can just work with what it is. And there's also limitations of the idea, right? This is a technology, whatever, but like there's limitations to this idea and how it has to be sort of gardened.
I'm looking forward to our first real fork, like Bitcoin Cash was. Like a whole new Nostr that picks up some momentum and goes on an entire different direction that is not even compatible with Nostr anymore.
Is it realistically possible? Because like Nostr is so flexible. I know it feels inflexible, especially when you have Fiatjaf on the panel. I mean, it feels inflexible, but it's like super flexible, right? Because you can choose to not like interact. So like that's the ultimate flexibility.
No, I think there are some fork potentials like changing the format, changing the signature, whatever. There are people that want to do that. And
the binary content is a big one.
Yeah, Merkle trees and vector clocks and stuff.
Yeah, so here's one for example, like if I had to design this, which I didn't, it would be binary, right? It would never be JSON. Fuck JSON.
And you will never be as famous as Nostr is today.
Exactly,
right?
But
it's the best worst decisions.
No, but I say seriously, like most people can't deal with binary data.
It was binary in my first draft. It was binary. In my defense.
So
and then Fiatjaf looked at us and was like, "These idiots! They were not going to do anything. Let me turn this into text."
No, but see, like that's the reason why you have a winning protocol and I don't, because I would have said, "Fuck you! It's going to be binary, like because it's better, right? Like and nobody's going to use it, right?" So, like, props to you for like choosing things that open, like they have more bridges, right?
And it's actually not only that. I do consider the fact that Nostr might be in a similar way like Bitcoin, that the package works. You can try to change individual features in it, and you'll create side effects that make it not work. So the package is working right now for Nostr. I don't know if somebody can create a version of this that will work better, but for me, it's a very similar feeling that I have between the two.
Like the cool thing is, like, if it truly is better, right? Like an alteration of this, because we don't have a time chain and we don't have consensus that is like an absolute consensus. Like, it is really not that hard to sort of slowly upgrade. It's not really a migration; it's more like an upgradation. Right? Like you just upgrade specific things and you create bridges that are temporary, right? Like, and you slowly sort of move there. There's no
like
risk.
IPv6.
Yeah,
right?
Which never really happened that well, because you can still spoof it. I think
that's a terrible idea because the old thing will never go away. So you just add a new thing, and then that becomes bloat for everybody. Now everybody has to implement all the things. You never fully transition. You just add a new thing.
But if you have like a critical mass transitioning, like it does eventually, the old thing dies, right? So it's like in effect, it did get upgraded.
Well, you still need to deal with the old stuff if you want your users happy.
You're eventually going to have clients that are just like, we support all the legacy formats and none of the new ones.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's an existential question, right? Like more than like really, it's kind of stupid question really that I asked because like it's an impossible answer.
We agree.
So guys,
What else? What else would you have done differently?
I don't know. I really feel like there's a lot of things I don't like, but I feel like they're right, and I was an idiot for not liking it or for not thinking it that way. Like I like that. I like when I feel like it's not my preference, but that's because I'm wrong. You know, like Bitcoin has a lot of that. Like there's a reason why like you arrived at that sort of like minimum viable idea that works and it took off and all the other shit didn't. It's because like the combination of these things that were your preference or your compromises are more viable than everybody else's, right? Like I don't have a lot of things I would change.
The timestamps, the time.
Yes, actually, yes. I would have used ECDSA just because it has like way more market adoption and you would have had a lot more interesting signers immediately available.
That's too bad. Like the using that Edwards whatever ED25, everybody loves that curve much more than SEC.
People should not love curves except for ECDSA because it's a nipple.
So the other fundamental point that could have yielded a very different Nostr was to do key rotation from the beginning.
Yes.
Meaning not attached your identity is not attached to your public key. It's attached to something else that when you download a package from the relay, you are not only checking the signature, but you're also checking if the user still has control over the key, which is what the DID people do. That model, engineering-wise, is better. But in practice, makes things very difficult.
Yeah, but the problem is like if people can't fucking deal with, but if people can't deal even with binary data, how the fuck are they going to deal with like complex key rotation, right? Like it's just never fucking going to happen.
That's why DIDs never worked. Yeah, that's why the like verifiable credentials and all this stuff they have been there for like 12 or 15 years or so, and like they haven't actually grown to, frankly, anything. I mean, we have had some usage, but it's not interoperable at all. I was doing them like 3 years ago. It's not interoperable at all because the payloads are all different from one another. And I'm like, okay, well, it's just a signature style that no one actually talks to one another.
But, you know, to be fair to Fiatjaf on his very poor decision of choosing Schnorr, the cool thing is like
I saved a byte.
If we you saved a byte. It is true. That's literally like the best Bitcoin joke. So there's a few cool things, right, that we get with that. Like, I mean, Schnorr is a lot better in many other aspects too. But you know, we can have MPC happen, right, where you can't really do a VCDSA. That's why Fireblocks got fucked. And with MPC, we could de-risk clients substantially, right? When they're signing things, you can have a signing server, a signing plugin, whatever, where neither have full key set. And, you know, honestly, like if we were able to attract a few galaxy brains, like cryptography galaxy brains to go pay attention to this problem, I'm pretty sure somebody could come up with a key rotation scheme that was like reasonable. You just look at all the complete fucking insanity of signature adapters on Bitcoin. It's the most fucking insane system in the planet. It's like, I have this primitive and I have to try to stick everything backwards compatibly with the old signature type, right? So like, you can't just do new things. You have to just make them fit in the original hole, doing completely insane things, right? So it's not impossible to do any of this stuff. It's just the right people need to be attracted to it. And I haven't seen a lot of nerd sniping on the cryptographer crowd to come fuck around in Nostr yet.
Yeah, I agree. We don't really have a lot of help from them. We were just finishing like our new GM proposal there, and we're still debating if that system is private or is secured enough, because we haven't had a lot of discussions with cryptographers to validate the thinking that, you know, it is actually better than NIPO 4.
John,
he's shaking.
I hope you're not. Yeah, I hope you're not like hypothermic yet.
So close.
Okay. When you're done, you tell us. Okay. I don't want to see purple lips. That's when you know you crossed the line. So, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, can we do it? Interested?
I'm one of those developers that Fiatjaf attracted by choosing JSON instead of binary. So
I love it.
So the way I put it on the like new encrypted chat stuff was like, all I know how to do is like nag people and make action items. So yeah, I think based on what Paula has said, we should get a little bit of funding together and support an audit of the new scheme. I've learned a lot about cryptography and just privacy over the last couple of weeks working on this. And it seems like there's not really a cryptographic primitive that you can just use and drop into these encrypted group chat situations, even if you disregard all the metadata stuff.
Or Mimo.
So that makes it a lot harder.
So have you thought about, I don't know if it's the right place, but maybe opening this can of worms and just emailing the Bitcoin mailing list and say, hey, anybody interested in looking at this? I mean, they're going to hate me for saying this, but you know what? Like, somebody's going to see it. I really, like, because he uses a Bitcoin primitive, right? That, like, really, nobody else fucking uses Schnorr for anything else on this specific curve, right? So, like, you'll be interested in, you know what, there might be some people there. I've been trying to nerd snipe Bolstra, and it's not been successful. Like, what do you think, Fiat? How do you attract some cryptographers to come and hack at this?
I don't know if you should right now. Like, maybe you should wait a little more.
It's a different set of problems.
That's right.
Yeah. And they know about Nostr, right? But they're not interested. Like, they're not interested in anything that is not the amazing cryptographic.
No, I think a lot of this crowd is not interested in social media in general. Like, you don't see them like shit posting on Twitter all day either, right? Like, maybe Waxwing, Adam Gibson, he does post a little bit more. Actually, he moved to Nostr from Mastodon, so he does post.
I think we need to Hodlbod. We need to add like a way to display equations on the feed, and then they come. And I was like, get some mathematics going on.
Yes. It's a different crowd, different interests, and...
What can we do on Nostr with zero-knowledge proofs? I think that will attract some people. If you do something with zero-knowledge proof, even if it's a complete stupid thing, like, you do a very big marketing stunt with it.
You can do likes.
Challenge accepted.
You can do private, like, complete private likes. You know, bulletproof. Literally, that's a type. Private likes. There you go.
I'll go talk to GPT and whip something together. It'll be really good, I'm sure.
You know, we do have like a lot of people working on Nostr as a coordinator for CoinJoin. It's really cool. There's a lot of potential, right? Because, you know, cryptography with like social content that includes money, it's kind of like a perfect place for coordination, right? We don't want to use the fucking web. We don't want to use Twitter. We don't want to use some centralized CoinJoin server. Like, to me, Nostr is like the perfect solution. You just use a disposable key for now. Yeah, ID should never be linked to money. That's one of the reasons why I don't like Zaps. I love Zaps, but I don't like Zaps. It's a complicated relationship. Anyways, guys, listen, it's been 2 hours almost, and John has purple nipples. And I'm not gonna. I'm very grateful you guys were willing to take this time to come on. So, any final thoughts, Fiatjaf?
Leave me for the end. I don't want to be the first.
Oh, I did this on purpose, so you can say that, and then you come back again at the end. Oh, we lost Fiatjaf. Vitor, any final thoughts?
Perfect last thought. Thanks for having us.
John.
We got to take this stuff seriously. Like, this is one of the existential threats for Nostr, is that developers don't want to work on it because we can't get content moderation figured out, and, you know, no one wants to go to jail. I don't really think like people are looking at us, but if we become successful, they will.
I mean, you know, like, they can just like it's much easier to do DragNat with Nostr. You know, they can just run a relay that is like, you know, copying the relay.
We have all the information.
This is the
they
wet
want.
dream. That's right.
Those are good final thoughts.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was great. Again, guys, super grateful you were willing to give me 2 hours of your time. This was, I think, like ultra super constructive conversation. I'd love to do this again on a different topic. You guys are the people actually fucking working on stuff, not just LARPing. So it's what you have to say is very important. And so thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
So we were just talking off camera about SimpleX Nostr integration. After just the little chat we had, I was just thinking like, you can almost leave SimpleX as is. And then instead of trying to make the integration too tight, you just use Nostr DMs as the coordinator. Because right now SimpleX uses Tor and falls back to DNS and how you do the coordination, right? Because we already have two people who are known to each other and are capable of sending a DM to each other, you could just send the link to coordination through the Nostr DM in a way that's, maybe it's a separate DM type, so you don't fill up people's DMs with like a bunch of like nonsense. As long as you fix the metadata leak and the encryption, that would be fine. Like Nippo 4. I am not concerned about the metadata leak. It's not as concerning because like if you think about in terms of like, these keys are already known to each other and we just have like forward privacy as a start, that's already huge. It would be very hard to hide. NIP 44 is really nice though, because like, 24, because you can if you just use an ephemeral key, that fixes a lot of the metadata stuff.
Yeah.
And the ephemeral keys could be deterministic, right? From your Nostr key, your NSEC.
They could. I think it's better if they are not, though.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? You want them to be disposable and unknown.
For the gift wrap idea, the idea is to make it disposable as much as possible.
I mean, I keep on bringing this up like 50 times. Maybe somebody one day will bite. There used to be the old, off the record, OTR that was on Adium for IRC DMs. And now I think it's called Omimo or something like that. It's pretty like well sort of defined, well known protocol that could be used for DMs too. I don't think it's going to help with the privacy of meta leak, but it definitely gives you forward privacy. You share a key once and then you just do rolling keys, right? But the original key is ephemeral.
Yeah, again, it all depends on what... I think this is why Nostr is so beautiful, because you can actually have multiple of these solutions implemented in parallel. And the mindset the client sets for the user defines everything else. So if it is some type of GM that is supposed to be used in the most extreme private cases, then you're going to use client X. If you're willing to let some of that privacy go for additional commodities that you can get because we don't have as much privacy anymore, then you can use client B. If you are willing to get fully traced online because you're going to help the algorithm that you're using and that will give you better information on your own feed, then maybe you choose client C. So like all of these solutions are different protocols for privacy and DMs and so on. And they can frankly all exist in parallel. We don't need to choose one. The users can choose by themselves.
But then there is the other sort of like school of thought in Nostr that like you only want one solution per functionality, right? So that all the clients are compatible too. So you don't want like 3-4 different kinds of DMs.
Right, but those are different solutions for me. Like because the user mindset is different, these are different things. They're not the same. An IRC and WhatsApp for me, they're not the same product. One is just more private than the other. Yeah. Like you can have an interoperable solution with different privacy levels. So like the relay selection thing is a really important part of metadata leakage. Like it's already hard enough to implement NIP 65 and
and kind of handle deliverability. Now you have to think about, are you using the same IP address for multiple accounts? Are you using the same WebSocket connection for multiple accounts? Are you authenticating? Maybe you want to turn off authenticating if you're sending a DM to someone's inbox. It's like it becomes exponentially more complicated, and like a really privacy-focused Nostr messaging client is going to have to pay attention to that kind of stuff. Whereas like something like Coracle, I'm just going to have an icon that's like an unlocked lock icon that's like, please don't trust me.
Yeah, guys, like history is peppered with all the failures of encrypted private comms, right? Like, remember, the state does not want you to have encrypted private comms, right? So everybody else there, including the two spooks as guests today, just kidding, will try to mass and push standards around, right? Like, I mean, these guys have like line item budgets just to fuck with this shit, and they will. So there is that sort of part. And then, like, you can start looking. I mean, like, you look at the greatest failure of the internet pretty much was PGP, right? I mean, like, it's secure, kind of. Nobody really trusts OpenSSL because you can't audit it. And like, the spooks really made sure that no email client had an easy way to use it. So and the email providers want to read your emails for ads. So like, it's pretty rough. So like, we kind of like do the opposite of PGP in every aspect, and it should work out. I'd still like, I think what an amazing thing we could do is like, if it was SSH based for comms, that would be amazing. It's like you have like a very cool way of sharing your public key. And then boom, you're now just SSHing with each other.
What's more secure these days, the Bitcoin curve and cryptography around it, or SSH?
Well, it depends on which crypto library you're using for SSH, right? That's one thing. I mean, I don't put anything past the very deep spooks. They probably have a backdoor on everything, but they're not going to use it because they dox it, right? It's kind of like Heartbleed. Those guys had Heartbleed for God knows how many decades, right? Like, and they probably wanted something really bad, like Silk Road or something, and then they broke SSL, right?
The real solution is to just cut out all the public infrastructure when doing communications. Like, one thing I loved about Scuttlebutt, or at least I think it was Manyverse, is the device-to-device communication over a local network.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I mean, like, if you want to be secure, unplug. Like, I mean, it really is simple. Like, I'm a big fan of, SneakerNet, and which is you just pass the drive, right? And have your own radio comms, which helps a lot. But even like just Wi-Fi, man, you can do long-range Wi-Fi between people and do quite well.
I like animated QR codes.
I used too many QR codes in the past 3 years to be able to use it again.
I find QR codes scary because it's very easy to have cameras around.
Yeah. You can actually get a picture of QR code from miles away.
Yes.
If you really want to.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons we didn't got the Nostr private key from Amethyst on a QR code. Because as soon as you show it, the chance of leaking it goes through the roof.
Yes. All right, guys. We're going to put this part that we were talking about some shit at the end as bonus part of the show. Thanks for listening. For more resources, check the show notes. We put a lot of effort into them. And remember, we don't have a crystal ball, so let us know about your project. Visit bitcoin.review to find out how to get in touch.